Welcome to the Strategic Leader Podcast with me, Gemma Bullivant, and my co-host, Fiona Craig. This podcast is for HR professionals and people-focused leaders from any function who want to think, act, and feel naturally more strategic. Enjoy the show. Hi, Fee. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. How are you doing, Fee?
Gem, I'm good, thanks. Good to see you. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you. What have you been doing this week that's made you stop to think?
Oh gosh, Gem, now that's a question. I did a team coaching session on Friday, which I thought was really, really good. So that really made me stop and think in terms of actually maybe I'm slightly better at this than I think I am.
That's nice. That links with our theme today,
Oh,
which is
yes.
confidence. And what's really made me stop and think this week was I took the rare opportunity for a bit of learning. Did a short course on stress, managing stress.
Yes.
Confidence is our topic today, isn't it?
Yes, confidence. And I'm just wondering, when you even say the word, I sort of have a reaction to it. I kind of go, ooh. So I'm wondering, if you're listening, what your immediate reaction is to that word, confident. Does it make you kind of cower away? Are you thinking, yeah, I'm all over it? Or, oh no, this is a tough one. I wonder what your reaction is to that word.
Well, we honed in on this topic because it's part of our series of possible blockers to being more strategic. And we've explored quite a few already. And we have also touched on the idea that it is somewhat of a big Venn diagram of life, and all of these topics do intersect each other. But often what does come up that means that we are questioning how strategically we are operating, our ability to operate in that strategic space, often does come back down to our own self-confidence and lacking in confidence. We've talked about imposter syndrome. We've talked about all sorts of other self-limiting beliefs and also an inner critic and all sorts of other things that kind of relate to this topic as well. But there is quite a lot for us to talk about in terms of confidence. What do you mean when you say confidence? What does confidence mean to you, Fee?
That's a good one, because I would say this has changed over time, changed with perhaps age and wisdom. But I would definitely have said that confidence is social confidence. So the ability to talk to anyone, to walk into a party on your own, to speak in front of people, to be up for the challenge. Probably, I guess what I'm saying is something akin to an extrovert, happy to talk, happy to share their thoughts. I've changed that, actually. That's certainly what I thought confidence looked like. But over time, I've realized that I don't think that's truly confidence. I think that's sort of a confidence shell. And I remember back in my early 20s when I lived in a shared house with some college mates, and we were all looking for jobs, and we were all looking for the same kind of level jobs, apart from one of us. Shout out to Lindy if you're listening. She was going for we had the same qualifications, same backgrounds. She was just going for much bigger jobs than the rest of us, and and was getting them. And I remember asking her whether, what gave her the confidence to kind of apply for those jobs that were just so much better paid, so much more senior than the ones the rest of us were going for. And I was like, are you kind of not worried about them? Are you not scared about them? Are you not worried about going to those interviews? And she said something which really, really struck me. And she said, well, yes, I am scared. Yes, of course I'm scared. I'm really nervous. I'm really worried. But that's not a good enough reason to not do it. And I remember, mind blown, because I think up until that point, I'd assumed, oh, that's a really senior job, therefore I can't apply for it. So it was that notion that if you don't have confidence, you can tap into some courage. It's like, well, let's just be courageous instead and go for it anyway. The notion that if you don't feel confidence, it's not a blocker to doing the thing you want to do. You just have to find a way around it. And that was really revelatory to me. So it's that kind of confidence can also include fear and nervousness and worry. It can include all of those things, but we can still summon something to move forwards if we think about it differently.
Yes. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think like you, years ago, I would have described confidence in a similar way. In other words, all of those qualities that we see the external, that version of that shell that you described of confidence, all the things that you notice in somebody else, a very extroverted energy. And as an introvert, that was something that felt like it was completely beyond my reach and was something that I couldn't ever aspire to achieve. However, I did also recognize that I do carry a reasonable amount of self-confidence and always have. And it was more of a sort of a quiet version of confidence, a sense of capability and a sense of belief that I could do what it was that I was going to get on with and do. And yes, I would have the fear and
The fear.
the fear.
We all know that. We all know what that is.
But I was also okay with the idea that it wouldn't necessarily matter if it didn't go brilliantly, that there would be stuff that I would learn from it, that there would be, I suppose I had quite a strong kind of growth mindset approach, and we talked about growth and fixed mindset before, this idea that it's okay to make a few mistakes along the way. We will learn from what those mistakes are. We will learn from the activity that we are fearful of giving a go. And that actually, for me now, the definition of confidence has really evolved to a sense of capability, a sense of self-belief, an inner conviction that we can do whatever it is that we're wanting to do, the task at hand, and that everything will be okay regardless really of the outcome of that. And the training that I did last week with John Perry really reminded me and brought that home, because something that he talked about in the training, in my original coaching training, and he touched on it again last week, was this idea of self-worth versus self-esteem, and that we confuse the two, and that we really need to not confuse the two, and that can unlock an awful lot of confidence for people once we've realised that they are actually not the same.
So, yes, that's interesting. I mean, it's so interesting that you describe yourself as an introvert, because I have known you for many years, many decades, and I experience you as a confident person. But now that you say it, it's like, well, yes, you are an extrovert. I know that, but you can still be very comfortable in your own capabilities. That also comes through.
Well, we've said in a previous episode that I don't fit any of the profiles particularly well. And Myers-Briggs is one of those, because actually I'm somewhere in the middle, which some describe as ambivert. But
Yes.
my Myers-Briggs score is I, but very, very slightly I. So I'm then boxed with every single I that there is, when actually I'm only a couple of points away from being boxed as an E. And so I do flex that between the two. But of the two descriptions, when you're invited to figure out which one you identify most closely with, I definitely identify more closely with introvert than extrovert, in the sense that working with lots and lots of people really exhausts me. Working one-to-one feels less exhausting for me. I am very happy in my own company. In fact, that kind of solitude is something where I can re-energize. I don't re-energize with other people as much as I re-energize in my own company. So there's all sorts of examples of that. Let's not rabbit hole into introvert and extrovert stuff. But just to say that idea of self-assuredness and the idea of self-worth versus self-esteem really, really hit home for me. What John Perry says about self-worth and self-esteem is self-worth is that sense that I am fundamentally okay as a human being. I'm born okay. I am born 100% okay. There is nothing that I need to qualify the fact that I am a worthy human being. I have self-worth. Self-esteem is this more externally validated version of what we can sometimes confuse as the same thing. And self-esteem is that quest for winning the race, passing the exam, doing a great presentation, winning the pitch. And if we don't achieve those things, somehow we we allow that to erode our sense of self-worth when actually it's our self-esteem that's being eroded, not our self-worth. We are still fundamentally okay if the pitch doesn't go well, or if the presentation doesn't go well, or if we don't pass that exam. I'm still fundamentally okay as a human being. The moment you connect with that idea, I think it can unlock an awful lot around confidence, because confidence really, for me, is a sense of self-belief and a sense of capability and a sense of that self-assuredness, that core strength that holds us okay regardless of what's going on around us.
I think that's a really interesting point. It might be quite easy to say I'm a confident person or I'm not a confident person as a sort of blanket term. And I think thinking strategically in the workplace, that's not particularly helpful because it's situational. You don't you don't go through a lot of your day needing confidence. There are moments and occasions when it might come into your mind. It might be a presentation or a job interview, or you might be called upon to do something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, and it's only in those moments that you become aware that you're not as confident as you'd like to be.
Mm.
But I think the blanket terms of I am confident, I'm not confident are not particularly helpful, because that a notion of capability that you reference is probably more helpful to think, well, I am perfectly capable for most of the time. And then there are occasions where my confidence fails me, or I'm suddenly becoming aware of the fact that I'm not feeling particularly confident.
Mm.
Just because the task is bigger, the task is more challenging, the task is less comfortable. And what can I do in those moments? So I really like the idea that we can, we don't have to have that kind of exterior, everybody knows I'm a confident person, everyone thinks I'm a confident, that sort of exterior shell of self-esteem it feels very brittle. We don't need to have that. It's like, well, can I just summons that bravery, that courage, that sense of inner capability and that sense of inner self-worth in those moments where I suddenly become aware that I'm feeling a bit wobbly? What do I do if I don't have it? You can't just go and get it, right? If I'm about to speak to a crowd of 60, 100, 200 people and I'm not feeling very confident, and someone goes, oh, you're going to be great. That doesn't touch the sides, does it? Because I can't go and just get myself a big dose of confidence. It's not like an energy gel I can just sort of mainline before I go on stage. So it's like, well, if I haven't got confidence, what else can I turn to? What else do I need? And that
Yeah.
ability is really helpful. That sense of courage is really helpful. That sense of, do you know what? This is probably going to be okay. And if it's not, I will survive. I will cope. I'm thinking of the very first self-help book I read back probably in the 90s. I don't know when it was written, but it's Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway
Yeah.
by Susan Jeffers. And it's just such a great title. I mean, you almost don't need to read the book. Feel the fear and do it anyway, which is it's okay to be scared, but still do it. And she says, fundamentally, all of the things that make us feel nervous and lacking in confidence come down to some fear that we won't cope.
Yes.
So if you can say, do you know what, whatever happens here, I will cope. I
Yeah.
will survive. People will still love me. I will go home to my kids or my partner or my best friend. They will give me a big hug and say, do you know what, shit happens. And
Yeah.
I will still be okay. And I guess that comes back to your fundamental sense of
Self-worth.
self-worth, which is I was born okay and I am okay. And
Mm.
I really like that. I will cope.
Yeah, yeah. And also that idea that this confident person, with extrovert energy that can completely hold a crowd on a stage, position a really great presentation is one version. Most of us, if we were to say, how would I define confidence? How would I describe a confident person? It often involves somebody on a stage or
Yeah.
doing a presentation. It involves presentation skills
Doesn't it?
typically.
It involves standing up and kind of performing in some way in front of other people.
And yet that is just one activity. And I like the idea of bringing it down to activities. I deeply dislike most things that are binary. I think there's always versions of
Mm,
something
mhm.
that we
Yeah.
can access. And I think that the other big influence in my thinking around confidence is Viv Groskop, who
Yeah,
wrote
she's
the
a
book.
she's a gem, isn't she?
I talk about her so much. I must come across like such a fangirl, but but she's
She's worth
written.
it. I would say she's worth it. She's great.
She is, and she wrote the most recent book that she's written on this topic is Happy High Status, and the subtitle of it is How to Be Effortlessly Confident. So Happy High Status, how to be effortlessly confident, and she's building on ideas from a previous book that she wrote, How to Own the Room, which was about presenting. So it starts in that place that we all recognise as confidence, presentation skills, effectively. But what she talks about in Happy High Status is something, a concept I love, which is exploring your version of confidence. Let's get really clear on what kind of confidence we can relate to, tap into, leverage, improve on, really help to flourish, that enables you to operate with confidence, but in your own way. Because at the end of the day, if something feels beyond reach, out of reach, being a stand-up comedian style, confident, extroverted personality is never really going to feel authentic to me. That's not my version of confidence that I even want to aspire to be, in actual fact, because there are so many other types of confidence that I think I could much more successfully master. And she talks about these versions of confidence and brings them to life with lots of examples and people that we can relate to. And there are some fabulous ones.
Go on.
Well, she talks about some of the typical versions that we might recognise. So that entertaining style of confidence, using humour. You know, if we relate it to leadership, we can probably think of leaders who are quite entertaining. We're drawn to people who make us laugh, aren't we? I mean, we actually, ironically, we often think comedians are confident, and if you read their biographies, often they are fundamentally not.
Yeah, the stage fright of performers and actors and comedians. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Not the subject of this podcast, but that's interesting.
Yes, absolutely. But, you know, what we see is perhaps confident behavior, but they're not necessarily feeling confident. They're probably doing an awful lot of what you've said, which is feel the fear and do it anyway, or feeling scared, but that's not a good enough reason for me not to get on the stage, because I do also feel energized after I've done it, and all of those sorts of things that you might associate with. But she explores that version of confidence that we can probably closely associate with. Another one that's pretty typical is that dominant version of confidence, that she calls it mafia energy, or charisma with mafia charisma without the murdering.
I'm glad you added that bit. I think we can all think of a few people like that, can't we?
But they obviously the mafia version of confidence. You see it, don't you? There's a steely gaze. There's a
swagger.
There's a swagger. There's an authority. The person enters the room and everyone is either in fear. I mean, there's a whole other episode just on using fear in a bad way. But what Viv Groskop also explores is this idea that sometimes we are hesitant to access some of this charismatic mafia behaviour, rather than charismatic entertaining, but the charismatic mafia, that almost the villain that we just, you know, we're often drawn to the baddie, but in all the wrong ways. But she says that can sometimes stop us from accessing some of that energy ourselves, because we're just fearful that it's going to tip in the wrong direction, but it can be used for the good. So she's certainly not suggesting we all become mafia dons, but that there is this dominant style.
I do wonder whether women are, you know, definitely not encouraged and not sort of supported to tap into those types of emotions and expressing them in that way, and we're probably penalised for doing it too, which again is a good reason to not do it.
I mean, the only woman I can think of in this dominant energy off the top of my head is Margaret Thatcher, and I certainly wouldn't aspire to.
But I'm thinking of people like, I don't know, someone like Tracy Emin, or someone who just really don't give a stuff too much. I mean, I'm immensely likable in many ways, but I'm not afraid of saying the unpleasant thing or the unpalatable thing or the challenging thing.
Mm,
And,
mm.
and I'm quite happy with the idea that some of you are not going to like me in this moment.
But regardless of whether we like that version of confidence or not, I think it certainly exemplifies that there's definitely more than one version of confidence to be
Yes.
had. And she also explores some other ones that might actually be quite surprising. One that she explores is the vulnerable style of confidence. And you sort of think, well, how can you be both vulnerable
What's
and
that?
confident?
Yeah.
That's that really feels like quite an oxymoron. But she says that a vulnerable style of confidence is where you can accommodate competing ideas without feeling threatened.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
okay if someone disagrees with you. You're okay if you disagree with someone else. There's a calmness, a balance, if you like, to that style of confidence. She cites Brené Brown as an example of this, someone that can just hold a conversation, hold different ideas in a space that's okay to explore.
Yeah.
And that there's a version of confidence that's actually, I mean, you used the term before, quiet confidence, but something that is just about, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with this going off into another direction. That doesn't faze me. I'm actually quite curious.
And that taps into quite a lot of the requirements of a strategic leader because you're often dealing with uncertainty, you're often dealing with change, you're often dealing with things that don't quite exist yet. And so that idea of having to hold competing theories or ideas, like both things can be true. It's a both and situation, not an either or situation. So being able to change your mind with new information, being able to explore something, being able to kind of weigh 2 points together without immediately having to be anchored on one, I think is deeply important at leadership level because there are fewer and fewer certainties. The more you get into that leadership space, less is
Mm,
certain.
mm,
So you have to be able to hold competing points of view or competing theories or competing concepts. And that is a quiet confidence. That's not a brashy, showy confidence. It's a sort of intellectual confidence, isn't it? Which is okay.
mm.
I don't really care what's going on the outside. My brain is happy doing the work here. That's a confidence as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think when I read Viv Groskop's book, and then I think about the work, the ideas that I referred to before from John Perry about self-esteem versus self-worth.
Hmm.
Whatever happens, my self-worth is not on the line. That is self-assuredness. That's that core strength.
Yeah.
And so if we can in some way tune into that and catch ourselves when we feel like we are escalating the stakes of a particular situation, how important this presentation is or this job interview. Yes, of course, they're important events in our lives, but are we actually disproportionately making them bigger than they actually are, and therefore adding so much stress, so much is riding on this event that ironically we probably perform worse than if we reduce the stakes of that event and allow that event to not be the determining factor of our value to this world, but instead we can relax into the situation and we will probably do a better job of it. Access a bit more of that capacity. He talks about operating in competency mode as opposed to
Mm.
the stress mode. It's all about fight, flight. We've talked about that before, our stress
Yes.
responses. The moment we go into stress response, we are limiting our access to our competency mode, the front part of our brain that enables us to access our cognitive abilities and do a better job of what it is that we're there to do, because we're in competency mode. And if we're able to just catch those stress responses, and one way of doing that is to really catch this proportion, this idea of proportion of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what might happen if. And he uses the scale of awfulness.
The scale of
And
awfulness, brilliant.
Ye yeah, yeah. So he uses the scale of awfulness, and it can be quite confronting in a way to use this, but what he says is, 0 is there is no stress, no awfulness at all in this. This is absolutely fine. where is this event for you between 0 and 100?
Mm,
And someone might, this job interview, someone might say it's 70 or 80, it's up there. Kind of go, okay, so where would you put Syria or
mm,
Gaza or something like that? If your job interview is at 80, is that realistic in comparison to some of
mm,
those other thoroughly awful events? Well,
mm.
no, maybe it comes back down to more like a 10 or a 20 in relation to those. And what he's doing there is he's just allowing us to recognize that really it's not quite as awful as our brain is
Mm.
telling us. Our brain's pumping us up. Our stress responses are pumping, and we're losing sight of the fact that really it's not such a high stakes event. And if we can bring it down, yes, it's still important. It's still meaningful. I care. It's not that I
Yes.
don't care
No,
about this
absolutely.
situation. In fact, I care enough to bring myself and my body into competency mode rather than allowing the stress mode to hinder me. I care so much about this that actually I need to bring myself down to a more realistic part of the scale of awfulness so that I can operate in competency mode. And I think that's incredibly powerful as an idea.
I really like that. And the idea of stepping into competency mode, it's just, as a strategist, I've just come up with a new 3 C's as alternatives to confidence. So if you feel like your confidence is failing you, can you step into competency mode, which is there are certain things here I am good at, which is probably why I'm in this situation, because I'm good at most of the things involved.
Mm.
Can I step into courage mode, which is,
Mm.
can I just accept the fact that this is a bit scary and just go, do you know what? Bring it on. Let's have a go.
Mm.
And can I step into curiosity mode, which is, well, I wonder what
Mm.
this is going to be like. I wonder what I'm going to learn from this. I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder what amazing things might come that I can't foresee because I'm stuck in stress mode. All of those things, courage, curiosity, and particularly competency, feel like they're much more useful anchor holds if you
Mm.
haven't got confidence in that moment. They might all be far more useful, and you may end up creating confidence as a result of those things.
Yes.
I really think that confidence, you don't start with confidence. Confidence comes from doing stuff. So
Yes.
if you start by tapping into what did I just say? Competency, courage, or curiosity as kind of, oh, well,
Yes.
can I tap into those things? Can I start with those, then do the thing, and then realize that actually that thing went okay? Do you know what? It wasn't fun. It wasn't bad. It was okay. I've got confidence.
Yes.
Then the
Yes.
confidence comes afterwards. So if we look for confidence and feel we're lacking, maybe we're looking at the wrong point.
I really like that, and I like that. It's always good to get a model in.
Oh, especially when we make them up on the spot.
Oh, yes, isn't it good? But in all seriousness, it does help you just to hold some of the themes in your mind. And I think ultimately that is what we need to remember, that life is fundamentally a bit wobbly.
It is, yes. There'll always be turbulence, choppy waters.
Always be turbulence. And I'm a big one for metaphors, and I often use the metaphor of a boy bobbing around in the water.
I hope you
And the
mean a
bob
sailing boy, not a girl boy.
Yes, I'm talking about sailing, a
The a
buoy,
buoy,
as
buoy.
Americans call it, a buoy, and the buoy is moving around in the choppy water because life is wobbly, life is challenging, but it's anchored. So the anchor is that sense of core strength, that sense of confidence, that self-assuredness that holds us in that choppy water. And I think that's a really powerful metaphor as well for us to close the conversation on, I would say.
That sense of core stability, which we know physically, core stability supports all kinds of other physical functions. So we're looking for a mental version of the same sense of core strength,
Strength.
core stability.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes core strength is something you can't really look at or see. It's
Yeah.
that it's that ability to be able to put your socks on one, standing on
Oh,
one leg.
and
Um,
clean your teeth standing on one leg as well. That's the other
yeah,
one.
yeah, you don't necessarily have to have a washboard stomach, but your
No.
core strength is still there. And I think that's the other thing about confidence is you don't necessarily have to show up on stage with jazz hands,
Yes.
but you can actually carry confidence in a different way.
So ditch the jazz hands is what we're saying. The
Yeah, I think
confidence,
so.
real confidence lives on the inside. So self-worth version of confidence.
Great.
I've enjoyed this conversation. I've learnt various things from it. We've come up with a new model, and it's been great. Thank you so much, Gem. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We really hope you've taken something away that you can use in real life, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. If you liked the episode, please subscribe to access more of our recordings. And if you think it'd be useful for someone else, please forward to them and leave a review. We base our content on questions we are regularly asked and what you want to know more about, so please do email us with any questions or comments to gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk. And remember, you're already being more strategic than you realise.